All right, everybody, welcome to episode 116 of the Fantasy Timeline, a proud member of the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network. I'm Josh at Real Fantasy TL. I'm with the co-host with the most, Drew at DR_PRA. Drew, how you doing, brother?
I'm good. Another week we get to talk about what's happening.
I love it. And if you're watching on YouTube, which you should be, you see our guest for this week. We got Spence at JTRB1. I think you can figure out what that means. But Spence, how you doing, brother?
Bro, I'm living the dream out here. You know what I'm saying?
Dude, excited to have you on. It's gonna be a fun ride tonight. So usually this time of year, news is kind of slow, kind of crawling. Maybe we don't even find anything worth talking about. But man, this week, everything was going on. The Bears, Broncos, Giants, Raiders, and we thought the Vikings for a minute had found head coaches. So obviously, if you haven't been in front of your phone within the last hour or so, it looked like the Vikings were going to get Jim Harbaugh, as I like to say, from Michigan to come to Minnesota as the head coach. And then he said, oh, wait a minute. I think I'm going to stay at Michigan. I don't know if the school slid him a couple more bucks. I don't know if he got that private plane. I don't know what happened, but it looked like a lock for the Vikings job. And now he is back with the Wolverines. I'm a little disappointed because friend of the show, Short Logic, was a little unsure about that hiring, and I wanted to troll him a little bit. And then old Jim, he trolled me and went back to Michigan. So what do you think about? I mean, you could talk about one of them, all of them. It doesn't matter. What do you think about these coaching hires? Is there one that you love? Is there one that you hate? Spence, since you're the guest, why don't you start us off?
I like it. So I would say my favorite so far has been Brian Dable. I'm a big fan of Brian Dable, what he was able to do with the Bills. Um, I'm not necessarily sold on Daniel Jones, but if there's a player that people were talking about coming into this year that they wanted to see do well, it was Daniel Jones, and it was based off of Josh Allen's career arc similarly. So if Brian Dable was able to work with Daniel Jones and with Saquon Barkley already there, and I feel like Kenny Galladay wasn't really utilized to the best of his ability. Kadarius Toney was looking pretty good at the beginning before all those injuries. I think that this offense could become fantasy relevant, but I'm concerned that either A, they don't ride it out with Daniel Jones, maybe they take a different direction, or they do ride it out with Daniel Jones and he continues to be what we've seen previously. So basically, I think the expectations are relatively the same, maybe a little higher, but I think that upside with Brian Dable there is something that piques my interest. Something that piques my interest on those players for fantasy relevance. You know what I'm saying?
So Drew, being the resident Bills fan here, is can't say is your favorite hire Dable, because obviously you would have
No,
rather have
it's not.
stayed as the
Yeah,
offensive coordinator
yeah.
for your squad. But do you like that hire? Is there another hire that you love? Maybe one that you hate? What do you think about that?
I shared this last night. I think it's one of the best hires. I think they went out and got him early, which was smart. They took their GM from the Bills as well. So clearly there's something there. They're looking to translate from the Bills' success. No two organizations are the same. No two teams are going to be the same. But I think there's a method of patience and development that was really good for Josh Allen. A lot of folks were really skeptical and for some really good reasons early on. I think after the first couple of years, a lot of people were really, really worried about, did the Bills make a mistake just going for this athletic guy? But of course, he's panned out really, really well. We have high hopes. As far as the Bills community, we're all thrilled for Dable to get his shot here. I think that's something that I love about Bills Mafia is we want to see everybody do well. That's coming through our place. So I mentioned it last night on the Trade Addicts pod. I hope we don't see him too much because I expect him to do good things. And, people laughed when I mentioned about the Giants playing in January at some time in a meaningful game. But if they do things similarly and have similar success, it won't be too long, I think, before the Giants could make some noise in the East again.
So I got a question for you guys, based off of Bills Mafia resident, and just a question I have in general. Personally, I'm on the team where good coaches play their best players. Like, good coaches apply their best players in ways where they're more relevant. So you take Brian Dable and the Bills, where they have Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, and nobody really that can run the ball. And you see Josh Allen take a lot of goal line carries, and you see him run a lot more than maybe some other athletic quarterbacks do in other systems. Do you think that with Daniel Jones' experience with running the ball, do you think he'll take on a similar role as Josh Allen, the goal line, and maybe some more RPOs and things of that nature? Or do you think because Saquon Barkley is there in comparison to Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, where they might, good, like I said, good coaches rely on good players. Saquon Barkley is obviously one of the best to ever come into the league, in my opinion. Do you think they'll rely on Saquon Barkley heavily, or are they going to use the Josh Allen model kind of with Daniel Jones? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because kind of I think the first step in the Giants rebuild is figuring out their cap situation. They're somehow in like they have cap problems, but they don't have a good team, which is always kind of like the worst of both worlds.
Agreed.
I think Brian Dable is going to try to build an offense that highlights what Daniel Jones does well, and he is a mobile guy. He can run. I think RPOs would be good, especially when you have to decide on is Daniel Jones going to keep it or is Saquon Barkley going to take it. I mean that's not a good place to be as a defense because if you guess Daniel Jones and he doesn't have the ball in his hand, Saquon can do some real damage as long as he's healthy. But I wonder if either one of those guys are in the plans for 2023.
Yeah, that's a great sentiment right there.
Because if Daniel Jones is what he has been the last few years, they're not picking up a fifth. I don't think at any point they're going to pick up his fifth-year option. I think they would rather see what happens. If he plays lights out, you franchise him, then you work on a big-time deal. And if he stinks, 2023, we've been talking about it in the dynasty community already. Man, the draft of 2023 is going to be great. There's going to be great quarterbacks. There's going to be great running backs. There's going to be great wide receivers. So I think that Daniel Jones could be gone and Saquon could be gone. If it's another, he's hurt, he's not hurt, he's only playing, 8, 9, 10, 11 games and he's out for half the season. I don't think Saquon gets that money from the Giants either. So I think Brian Dable is definitely going to put an offense that accentuates what they do well. But I also think this is kind of going to be a trial period for a lot of different people. And if they don't work out, they can, reset. I mean, they have 2 first-round picks this year, which obviously I don't think either one of those picks will be used for a quarterback or a running back. But, that's how they're going to try to build this team. They're going to try to bring in, rookies that don't make as much money because they have cap problems. And that might also be the plan in 2023 if, they have another 4, 5, 6 win season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the ideal is you mix it up with Jones, who can run. I don't think he's quite as athletic as Josh Allen, but he's dangerous enough. He's fast enough. I think ideally you scale back on Saquon's usage and you get a little bit more selective when you let him take some of the big hits. You've got Kadarius Toney, who is an offensive weapon when he's healthy. So you've got some really fun options that you can get the ball out of Daniel Jones' hands quickly. You saw in his first couple of years too, he could hit the deep ball. He hit Darius Slayton a few times for some long passes.
He got some good arm strength.
Yeah, he's got some tools, and I think ideally you spread things out and you don't put as much on him. That's where he really gets screwed, is when he's trying to play catch up or he's trying to play hero ball, and he's not that talented.
Yeah, the
But
turnovers are definitely his main weakness.
Yep. So I think you have some good options there to play around with some things in the playbook if they keep that group together. I don't know enough about the cap and where they are to see what's realistic of who they might keep or what they could bring in. But yeah, I hope he does well. I hope Dable does well in general, and hopefully the Giants are patient with him and his system like the Bills were.
I don't want to stick on it too much. I just felt like bringing that up. I thought it would be interesting to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
No, I love it because they're going to be an interesting team going forward. I mean, they kind of brought, they want to be Bill South kind of. They want to take a team that was trash for a very long period of time, like the Bills were, and build it through. I mean, they really built this team through the draft for the most part. I mean, Josh Allen, you talk, everybody's darling right now, Gabe Davis, Devin Singletary.
And the only one they really brought in like that was a bigger name was Stephon Diggs, right?
Right.
Yep.
And then they just grabbed
defense.
They grabbed some cheap guys, like Emmanuel Sanders and
Cole Beasley.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like I mean, I'm a big fan of the way the Bills were able to revitalize the franchise. I think the Giants could totally head in a similar path. I think last year when they brought in Kenny Galladay for as much money as they did was kind of a real hit, for them.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited for what's going forward. But I like what you guys said, and I think what I'm hearing from you guys is temper your expectations for fantasy purposes. I don't think going into this year we should be targeting Saquon Barkley or Kenny Galladay or Daniel Jones very highly based off of Brian Dable hire. But there is some upside there. So they get some elevation, but I think they're all going to be drafted, or they should be drafted lower than they were this year, if that makes sense. That's what makes sense to me, and I think that's what you guys might be saying.
There'll be some risk reward there for sure. In some drafts, people will be out way too much. You might get a great value on one of those guys, but there will be some folks that'll go too early too, based on the news, and hopefully you get some other value to fall to you.
Well, just listening on Twitter, one guy that you're not going to get a discount on is Saquon. People are they're very high on Saquon. I'm not one of those people, and I'm fine kind of going against the tide there. But it's not a talent thing, and that people say, I say I'm not high on Saquon, and everyone's like, well, you don't think he's good, and I'm like, no, I think he's awesome, but the health is a problem, and I don't think that where they are with the cap and where they're picking in this draft, that they're going to be able to rebuild that offensive line in an offseason.
That's interesting you mentioned that, because like you said, they have the 2 firsts. And I personally, it all depends on Brian Dable's thoughts on Daniel Jones, which I think we'll find out early, within the next few months. I think we'll start hearing reports of what Brian Dable's thoughts are on Daniel Jones going into this, and then we can build off of that. So in my opinion, if Daniel Jones, if they think he is the guy, I think they might go O-line in this draft. In which case, I think that could bolster Saquon's ability. But then, like you said, the health is a huge concern. And there's a lot of people who are on the camp of I don't bet on injuries, or there's people who say, okay, this guy was out for this many games this past 2 years, I'm not drafting him. You know what I mean? And it's tough to find a medium with that crowd, between those two crowds, because you obviously don't want to draft players who are just going to be injured all the time. Like Kadarius Toney is scaring people off already. Kenny Galladay didn't, or not Kenny Galladay. Kenny Galladay kind of did it with the Lions the year prior, and then it was hard to see any improvement from this year. And then you talk about Saquon Barkley, and then Daniel Jones misses 2 to 3 games almost every year. So it's hard to buy into this offense when almost every player is missing games every year. So I think Saquon Barkley is the only player that I would be interested in at ADP come August when you're talking about redraft season, which kind of correlates to the offseason's dynasty it's probably going to like fluctuate a little bit, but in general, by the end of, August or July, you'll see his ADP be similar to Dynasty ADP just because of his age and everything. So I think Saquon Barkley might be the only player that I'm almost in on, just because the ceiling is high enough to the point where he could be RB1 at the end of the next season if he stays healthy. And that's something that I think you have to kind of chase when you're talking about an ADP where he's probably going to sit in the late second, early third round. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's going to be fun to see, especially once free agency hits and then the draft hits, what the Giants do, who they get rid of, and then who they bring in. And if they do draft, maybe just one of those top 10 picks is an offensive lineman, and maybe they grab somebody off of free agency on the cheap that might have, a little bit of talent. Then all of a sudden you could start seeing, all right, they filled 2 spots. They may need to fill 2 more, but they're at least. And I mean, we've all seen, we all saw that meme last year during the offseason with, Joe Burrow throwing to Chase, and anybody's blocking for him, and he never gets it off. And listen, the Bengals don't have an elite offensive line. They don't even really have a good offensive line, but they've made it to the Super Bowl. So I think some teams are also going to look at that. Now, I think that's a unique situation because Joe Burrow got sacked 9 times, and it didn't even phase him. I've never seen a quarterback get hit that many times and not start speeding up footwork or start rushing at the rows.
Yeah, he's special, man. He's just special.
I don't think that's a strategy every team should chase, but you're going to see some teams that have bad offensive lines kind of try to chase that because they think that it can be done because they saw it done once. And I think that's a very unique situation. But, I mean, if Brian Dable can also put together an offense where it's more quick hitters and we're not, 5-step dropping, 7-step dropping, hold the ball for 5 seconds while this offensive line struggles to block, the three of us.
Yeah. I think Brian Dable is going to be able to make Daniel Jones work. I think he's going to be able to make him work. I think he's going to get it to the point where it works. But I want to pose a short question to you guys. Do you think that the cap, relatively, do you think that the cap per player, like in their position, correlates decently well to how good that player is in that position? You know what I mean? So, like, for example, so a wide receiver gets paid X money. Do you think it relatively correlates to how good they are at the position?
No, because
you would say no. Okay,
I would say no for this reason, and obviously, I don't think this is a real yes or no question because I think it's really case by case basis.
It is case by case, but yeah.
But like, let's look at we're talking about the Giants, so let's look at a guy like Kenny Galladay.
Yeah, paid too much, right?
He got paid because he was the wide receiver in a weak wide receiver free agency class. So obviously that guy's
on a weak team and you're talking about in relation to his teammates, and I'm sure you all know, everybody knows who's listening to this, or you should know, target share is not necessarily dependent on your teammates, but it can correlate a little bit. When you talk about like Amon-Ra St. Brown this year, obviously all of his teammates got injured, and then at the end of the year, he just kind of blew up. That target share could be sustainable, but likely not based on the lack of competition. Kenny Galladay in a very similar position last year. You know what I mean? It was basically T.J. Hawkinson versus him, and that was it. You know what I mean? So I get what you're saying for sure.
So we see that in a case, but then we look at a case like Patrick Mahomes. I mean, his actual contract starts this season. He was still working off of that rookie deal, and now the extension he signed actually starts coming this season.
Yep.
But based on what he's done on the field, he should be the highest paid quarterback in the league. And, so it's kind of, free agency, I think, skews things a lot of times because.
Okay. But you're saying so free agency might skew it a little bit, but as far as like in team, like if they extend someone or they restructure or they bring somebody back or they hit the button on franchise tag? You
Yep.
think that's pretty relative? Okay.
I
So
think
the reason
usually-
Yeah, that's
I
what the
wanna
market
hear
bears,
Drew's
right?
answer.
Yeah, when you
hit me,
extend
Drew.
and stuff, that's what the market will bear. That's what
Okay,
you're able to
yeah.
draw compared to the other options that are out there.
Yeah.
I immediately go to somebody like Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, who's on a rookie deal right now. There's no way that their contract
Right.
is commensurate with what their contribution is, and that's the
100%.
beauty of the NFL, right? Is you've got to figure out which pieces can you bring in and pay, which ones do you need to cycle through and keep on the cheap.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think overall you get enough balance with the new guys and then with the guys that last long enough. And yeah, I mean, Brady was worth every penny to, every
100%.
contract he ever, right? He was underpaid. He was underpaid for 20.
With the Patriots, I would say. With the Bucks, I would say, I mean, honestly, you could say he should be paid the world, right? But as far as like you're building a team, you're trying to win Super Bowls, like he might have been paid a little too much, I think, with the Bucks. And I think that might have been a little bit of their downfall. And that's actually why I posed this question, because I wanted to hear you guys' thoughts on you talking about the O-line and Joe Burrow with the Bengals. I had a buddy do an article this offseason where he took all of the salary caps and all by position, and then not by position necessarily, but like O-line and D-line were one position, and then the rest were by position, and DBs too. But then he took that and then he correlated it to Super Bowl attendances, I believe, and then it kind of gives you an idea of how much you should be paying your groupings of players. So like wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, all that good deal. How much you should be paying them, and relatively to how much you have to pay someone to get to the Super Bowl. And O-line was one of the ones where it was kind of like a throw up. Like there wasn't actually a huge correlation. And I think it was based off of what Drew brought up with where once you bring in newer guys and maybe veterans, you know what I mean? Like that can skew it a little bit where O-line wasn't very correlative to how well you did it just in terms of the playoffs and how far you could go. Whereas a quarterback, it was very relevant where like you basically had to be Eli Manning or not Eli Manning, sorry, Eli or Peyton Manning or Tom Brady to be able to go to the Super Bowl, not on a rookie deal where you weren't getting paid, a minimal amount for your efforts. So you talk about Patrick Mahomes, that was huge for that team, the Chiefs, to be able to bring in the new O-line to be able to rejuvenate that last year, where they wouldn't have been able to do that if they were paying Patrick Mahomes too much. So you see Joe Burrow right now with no O-line, and he's able to do what he does. And I think that correlates well to the rest of the team, where you got Joe Mixon getting paid a decent amount and all these other Tyler Boyd's getting paid a decent amount. Like these are the kind of players where you don't normally like really want to pay them that much, but because the O-line isn't as correlative to winning, you can, when you have a quarterback like Joe Burrow on such a cheap deal right now, you can maneuver the cap in a way where you can afford to not worry about the O-line and just focus on other positions that could be more important.
Well, and I'll wrap this up with going back in the past a little bit. We saw this with Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson on a rookie deal.
Yep.
They were able to build an elite defense.
Exactly.
And I know you kind of go, wait a minute, he plays offense, defense, but he was on a rookie deal and he was a third-round pick. So not only was it a rookie deal, it was a much cheaper first-round pick rookie deal. And that's where you got the Legion of Boom from, because they could pay all these guys that they had already drafted and have an elite defense, lead a very good Russell Wilson and average offense to back-to-back Super Bowls, because it was cheap. And this is why fan bases get angry when they have elite quarterbacks on rookie deals. I'm a Cowboys fan, so obviously every Cowboys fan was like, why are we not doing more with Dak Prescott while we have Dak Prescott on this rookie deal? Because he was a fourth-round pick, so his contract is super cheap. He is a top 10 quarterback in the league. Why are we not doing more to get this team to the Super Bowl while we have him on the cheap?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you get that from a lot of fan bases when you find that young rookie quarterback and you're like, okay, now we can put all the pieces around him. Now we can do this while money is cheap and we don't have to worry about paying this guy 30, 35, $40 million a year and, completely blowing up our cap because he's making, I don't know what Joe Burrow's making this year, but $5, 6, 7,
Not
$8 million
much.
dollars.
Yeah.
He's making less than probably garbage backup quarterbacks that we laugh at when they have to start games. So it's a very important thing, and we've seen it throughout time that when you get the rookie quarterback on the deal and you can actually build an elite team around them, it usually works out well. We'll hit these two real quick so we can get into the timeline. Tom Brady retires. Thank you, Tom. 22 years. Pick 199. We know the whole bio at this point, and
Yeah.
it's just, we say this all the time, and then like someone comes along. I don't ever think we're going to see a Tom Brady again. I mean, at least not in my lifetime.
It'd be like seeing a Michael Jordan again.
I hope not.
Yeah, I mean,
Just so unlikely.
A guy who comes in. I mean, not only was he, and you can argue if he was the best to ever do it at his position, whatever. I'm not here to have that argument, but
yes,
a guy who comes from literally almost nothing when we talk about draft capital now. Could you imagine if, Dynasty was as big as it was when Tom Brady was drafted, and we're like, this 6th round pick, I don't even want to take him in super flex drafts. This dude, he didn't even start.
He would not have been taken. He didn't
start at Michigan.
Yeah.
He looks like a 35-year-old dad with his shirt off. I mean, we would trash this guy, and he really came from nothing in the NFL world to being the best. So,
yeah,
I'm glad I got to see his whole career.
Yeah,
I'm glad.
That's the best part was growing up.
Yeah.
Well, I'm younger than you guys, I think.
Right.
But for me, growing up, like I was a Steelers fan, so AFC was just nuts my whole life. Like I just got to watch Big Ben and Tom Brady go at it for my whole life, pretty much. You know what I mean? I mean, Steelers weren't always amazing, but like you have like Joe Flacco and Big Ben and Phillip Rivers and Tom Brady going at it in the AFC for like my whole life, and it was just like awesome. You know what I mean? And when I saw Phillip Rivers retire last year, I was like, damn, And then Breeze went out, and now Ben's out and Brady's out. So it's like everything's just, going away. And I mean, Flacco, what did he start a game for the Jets last year? Like, I mean, I'm glad for the guy, but, he's basically done. Yeah. So it's crazy, this moment, this Tom Brady retiring has really woken me up to the fact that, like, we're in a new era of the NFL. We already kind of we were getting there. But man, I mean, that really is,
And I'm glad he went out on top. He didn't, sign a 1-year contract with the Texans and go 7-10 and throw for 2,800 yards, 10 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. And we're like, oh God, like this dude should have given it up. I mean, he went out 5,300 yards, 40 touchdowns. I mean,
QB1
went out on top. I mean, got a Super Bowl in his second to last season. I mean, there's never going to be another guy like him.
Never going to be another Tom Brady.
Yeah, I'll tell you as a Bills fan, it was so good that he left and went to Tampa Bay for 2 years, because I think if he had retired straight away from the Patriots, I don't think I would have appreciated what he had done in his whole career. It just would have been that, thank God he's gone, celebrate all the happy gifts and memes about him being gone. So we got that out of our system 2 years ago. And to be able to just look at, the body of work, and you watch the last touchdown that he threw to Evans, and what the hell are you doing, Mike Evans? Hold on to the damn ball. Didn't you learn your lesson with the other touchdown ball? But to be able to see him go and do it in a different system, it's just it's unreal. So crazy to watch that whole career. And Josh and I were talking last night, how many Hall of Famers had their career inside of his career, some of them even getting inducted by the time he retired. And 100%. I saw going back to coaches, right? Vikings, most likely their new head coach was drafted 8 years into Brady's career as his backup, and now he's already a head coach. And how wild is that? And I've always been a Manning guy. I grew up and I loved watching Peyton Manning, followed him. And, for the longest, it was always, I love Manning. I hate Brady. But at this point, it's just such an appreciation for what he's done for the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. I said earlier, I'm glad I was able to watch all of it. Um, and we won't ever see that again. And then the final piece of news, and this is so Washington at like 8:30 in the morning. They drop. Man, they don't wait till like noon, 1 o'clock. They don't do big prep. They go on social media and they go, "Hey guys, we're the Washington Commanders. Let's go." 2 years. Yeah, 2 years. I mean, really, you should have probably had this planned out, just knowing what the social climate is. But that's beyond the point. You gave yourself 2 years to rebrand this team.
Unbelievable.
You probably paid millions of dollars to PR firms and marketers and social media people to come up with what is Washington going to be. The Commanders.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think if they had dropped it like a month after they dropped the Redskins, it would have been dope.
Yeah.
You know? People been like, okay, that's pretty cool. Like, all right, moving on,
Yeah.
But because, like you said, 2 years later, and like you said, I mean, I don't want to get into politics, but you talk about the climate. They're in Washington. The Pentagon's there, obviously Congress, all that stuff. Commanders, makes sense, military, whatever. But you just came from the Redskins. You're talking about people who the whole reason behind it, right, was because of Native Americans and how they were treated,
Mhm.
and how you're like kind of you know, furthering it by maintaining this name, and then you switch it up to commanders who were, you talk about commanders, like the people who were in the militias and in the militaries who first and did those acts. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
why become the people who everybody was kind of saying you were before? You know?
And,
I don't know. I think if nobody would have looked into it this deep, if it wasn't 2 years worth of time in between everyone thinking about the Washington football team and everybody thinking about the Redskins to come to the Commanders, then we wouldn't have even thought twice about it. We would have just been moved on, been like, okay, cool. But because of this like unnecessary length, I think it's just added to the unnecessariness of how like it's in your face. It's just so in your face, and I don't like that.
and I think another reason, and Drew brought it up for a little bit, I'm going to put it back on. Steve Dennis makes a really good point. He goes, yo, I kind of really liked it as Washington football team. And you know what? For 2 years, at first it was kind of like funny, Washington football team. That's goofy.
Football team.
But then you kind of were like, okay, like I'm kind of feeling it. I kind of, yeah, like I'm getting it. And you allowed people to kind of become connected to the Washington football
team. Throwback.
So to break that connection, you needed something big. You needed a name that was just like, oh wow, like this is it. We came up with the right rebrand here.
Right.
And then you came up with Commanders. And I was like, I mean, my 8-year-old son probably could have come up with actually something better than Commanders. But like that's something that like I would say, like it seems like a minor league football team, a semi-pro football team, or something that you would create on Madden. Or Washington.
It's like a default.
Yeah, you scroll through the names. Commanders sound good. I don't want to go through the whole
list.
Like
captains or lieutenants or something, but you're like, you know what? Commanders. That's dope.
Yeah, like, and another thing that I don't understand why they didn't do it. Why didn't they change that hideous color scheme?
They could. They can.
They had the chance to be like, okay, we're changing the name.
Total rebrand.
We're changing the look. This maroon and they call it gold. It's yellow, people. It's disgusting.
Well, and it doesn't even make sense for Commanders, right? You're talking about the military. You're talking about
right.
Commanders.
You could have went you know,
There you go,
United
navy
States.
and gold or something like that.
Right,
Green
that's what I was
and-
gonna say. You
green
got
and
Union
black.
Air
colors.
Force. Air Force is blue. Navy's blue. Marines are like bluish green. Army's green, and Coast Guard is whatever you want it to be, blue, whatever.
You
And
know,
they're still red. Who is red? Who
they
is or whatever that color is? It's not even red. It's like burgundy. You know?
It's based on their old logo.
Yeah,
Exactly,
You
and
know what I mean?
that-
It's like
Terrible. It's
and
yeah,
that's
terrible.
the
not-
and that's the problem. And that, I mean, not only is it in just an ugly grouping of colors,
I would
but
really like
it
silver,
also refers
honest.
back to what their
Mhm.
old logo is.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm just like,
Do better.
You guys had 2 years. I mean, if you just paid me and said, okay, 2 years, I need you by yourself to rebrand this entire football team, I could have done better. And this is what they came up with. But it's Washington.
Anyhow,
They're going to do what they're going to do.
you put in the notes here, Spence, whack. I mean, Washington is that's what the W's for.
Yeah.
True.
I like
True.
someone put on.
What even is their acronym anymore? Because like he said, like Steve said, I like WFT. I liked it. It was smooth. You know what I mean? I could type it out easy, no problem.
Yep.
Everybody knew what I was talking about. But now I got to type what? I got to type all Washington.
WC. That's the freaking bathroom.
Yeah, WC or like wrong chat. You know, work center. You know what? They don't know what I'm referring to.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean it's terrible.
And I'm a big fan of the 3-letter acronyms. Like I want to universalize 3-letter acronyms for all NFL teams. What am I going to do with Washington Commanders? Like WTC? You know?
Yeah.
I guess maybe like it's just not
WCO?
good. Yeah, like it's just there's no good way to put it, you know?
It's
Not a fan. Not a fan in general. Not a fan.
It's whack. They had time to change it up, and I honestly think they just did the easiest possible thing, and just said, "All right, let's come up with a name."
Nah.
What do you think about Commandos? Okay, cool. Sounds good. We're not going to change any of the colors.
Ooh, actually, Commandos would have been better than Commanders.
Oh yeah,
honestly.
I said Commandos. Commander.
But I would have been down for Commandos.
That would have been like a black and yellow.
That would have been almost
black and green.
Yeah, black and green or something.
I mean,
that would have been almost cool.
They could have went so many different directions. They could have done something that incorporated all of the armed forces since they're in Washington. I mean, they had so many options. They could have even just went off the beaten path and did nothing that was really associated with Washington, D.C. And I
mean, like Ridley said, they could have just went with another bird. I mean, birds are like the livestock of sports teams. Like he said, it's better than the Pelicans. I disagree. Birds, you can't lose with a bird. You could have just picked the Washington Parrots, and people would have been like, I mean, it's funny, but all right, I'm with it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, they had options and they blew it. So if you're a Washington fan listening to this, you probably agree with me anyway, but
apologies.
I'm sorry that this is
not for what we're saying, but for what you have to deal with.
Yeah, that's what it is. So, all right,
Football.
let's get into the timeline. We talked about the news, the good, the bad, and the ugly with the news. I'm gonna start off. I'm not gonna go in order on the show sheet just because I scrolled and I saw a lot of stuff that I like. So, this first one here, Spence. Obviously, I'll explain your handle just in case people haven't picked it up by now.
Okay. Yeah.
JT RB1, Jonathan Taylor. You were there right away. I think you're the conductor on the train, or you're at least in that first
class.
Yeah, like if you're not the
First
conductor,
class. I'll take that.
You're standing next to the conductor. So the
like
question
the guy shoveling the coal.
That's right. So doing the real work for
keeping that engine
for the
going.
JT train. So who, if anyone, do you see challenging Jonathan Taylor for RB1 this time next year? So when we're talking the 2022 season is over, has anybody challenged JT? Has anybody put a real effort into taking him out of the RB1 spot?
So right now, I'm going to say it's not even close. There's nobody close. Jonathan Taylor is either the youngest or one of the youngest best players in the league right now, best running backs in the league right now. So the only names that you see in contention right now are Javonte Williams, who hasn't really proved anything necessarily, but there's high hopes, right? But younger, right? Okay. And then we talk about Deandre Swift, similar age, but hasn't really proved it either. He's had a good stretch at the beginning of the season, but didn't necessarily prove it. And then you talk about Najee Harris, who obviously saw a ton of volume, loved that, dealt with a very poor situation, in my opinion, bad O-line, bad quarterback. Definitely could improve, could do well, but older. He's already the same age as Jonathan Taylor. And then you talk about you're talking about the end of 2022, and that's when you have to bring in Bijan Robinson, because now we're talking about the 2023 draft, right? Because we're already talking about the 2022 draft. So, I'll preface with this: I don't see anybody in the 2022 draft competing with Jonathan Taylor. Breece Hall is my RB1 personally, not close to Jonathan Taylor's tier. So we're talking about Bijan Robinson. Obviously, a good draft capital and good landing spot could vault him into RB1 contention just based on his hype. But right now, I don't think anybody could touch him in Dynasty. Christian McCaffrey's too old. Saquon Barkley's too old. Been too banged up. People won't buy into it. That's where we are. Then you want to talk about redraft best ball. You're talking about seasonal leagues and stuff like that. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey, I mean, every year until he retires, you're just going to say he has one of the highest ceilings in fantasy football. You can't deny it. His 2019 season was just insane. If he ever does anything close to that again, you're going to regret not drafting him. So I can't fault people for chasing that. But personally, I'll still draft Jonathan Taylor over him. I feel like he's safer. I still feel like Jonathan Taylor didn't get the full volume that he could have this season. He got good volume, especially the second half of the year, but you talk about extrapolating games, you extrapolate the games from the later half of the season, it's just insane. So obviously I'm JTRB1, maybe I'm biased. You guys can tell me if I'm crazy, but right now I don't see anyone contending with Jonathan Taylor as the RB1 going into the 2023 season.
Drew, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I love Jonathan Taylor as well. I got him at the 104 in rookie drafts when he came out in a couple of home leagues, which I was thrilled about. I was looking at the top four. People were trying to say, hey, do you want to go up to the 102? Do you want to trade up to 101 and get like Tua or Burrow? I was like, I'm going to get one of Tua, Burrow. CH had the hype, and I would settle for him at 4 based on the value at that point. But I was really hoping JT would get to me, and he did. And I loved him. I love him. I've had him in redraft for a couple of years. He brought me a championship this past year. But I think I said it last night on the Trade Addicts. I think there is a decent possibility that, especially if Melvin Gordon goes, I think Javonte could push him for that one spot. And I think you'll have a small contingent that maybe will hitch their wagon to him just to maybe piss off some of the JT truthers. I think in my brain, JT is it for the next couple of seasons. Even with that 23 class, there's so many other variables that would have to go right to get somebody to produce like he's produced. Whether you think he got 80 or 90% of potential this last year, I know people were up in arms the first 6-7 weeks asking Frank Reich what he's doing for usage when they saw the flashes.
I asked him the whole season. I'm not gonna lie,
but I don't know if he can do that and that gives him an extra season or two on the back end. I'm all for it. I think he's a special talent. Yeah. And I would love to see him go and be elite until he's 27, 28 based on his style. He's not going to be a guy like Kamara or somebody that can play more off the passes anyways. So I love watching him play. I'm a huge Javonte fan. He was my RB2 in the rookie class last year. And based on his age difference compared to Najee, I think we expected Najee to do better, which he did. So I do think that there is a possibility or potential for Javonte to go and push him for that, where it might be an easy 1-2, but I still think JT will probably be a tier above.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there. The only thing I'll mention based on what you're talking about is, like you said, Javonte was your RB2 in his class. And I heard you mention that was kind of based on Najee having more experience and age, so naturally he should do better in his rookie season, and like you said, he did. But you're talking about Jonathan Taylor, I just don't understand how there was any dispute between him not being the RB1. When you look at the college production, the profiles and everything, obviously CAH gets that first round draft capital. It's a nice boost, but it's still not enough to, change my perspective on Jonathan Taylor. So when you talk about Javonte, I think one of the concerns will be that he did split the workload already in his college career, and then coming to the NFL, he split the workload with Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon already put out a tweet saying he really hopes he comes back to the Broncos. I don't know if that means he's going to take a pay cut to come back or what, but, obviously that's a possibility. So I would just say, as far as actionable advice goes, I'm not like shooting for the moon with Javonte Williams just because it is a high upside, high loss situation where if Melvin Gordon comes back or they bring in someone similar to Melvin Gordon, you could be hitting a tier where he's like serviceable some games and then not serviceable some games, and then you'll be frustrated where you start him and you don't start him, and when he does well or whatever, So whereas with Jonathan Taylor, even with Naheem Hines there this year, wasn't that impactful to his fantasy production. So, and you mentioned he's not Alvin Kamara. Totally agree. Obviously, Alvin Kamara just garners tons of targets. You can't compete with that. Jonathan Taylor is not the best pass catcher in the world, but I will say Carson Wentz just missed him a ton. Multiple overtimes, multiple fourth quarter drives where Jonathan Taylor gets, he comes up, chop blocks, goes out into the middle of the field, and then Carson Wentz just launches it to Michael Pittman. And I'm not going to lie, sometimes it worked out, where you saw those crazy pass interference calls on Michael Pittman, and you're like, Frank Reich, what are you doing? But then it all works out in the end. So you can't be mad at it. But I will say Carson Wentz definitely missed him sometimes. And I think that's something, hopefully, that they attack when they go over their postseason film and they look at how many times Jonathan Taylor is just wide open in those situations, and they, correct that going forward.
Yeah, I think his style is different, is what I was getting at. Like he is not afraid to go between the tackles and get some of that contact. And I mean, he and Javonte are similar in that, right? Both in the rookie seasons had a high percentage of broken tackles. They were both getting hit early. Those very few, very short distance. Very short distance before contact and then still going, which I think some of that excites me about Javonte as well. And a lot of explosive plays in college, which hopefully translate. But yeah, I mean, JT is he's special.
I could talk about this forever, honestly. I mean, I've had the Javonte JT discourse like so many times since I don't know what you want to call it, like October, when Javonte really started to gain his stride. One of the things that I'll mention is you brought up the missed tackles. Obviously, very important to your game because every missed tackle means more yards, more fantasy points. Hopefully a touchdown, whatever you want to call it, wherever you want to go with how impactful a broken tackle is. One thing I'll mention is a lot of people bring up that Javonte Williams had X amount of forced missed tackles this year compared to Jonathan Taylor. One of the things that correlates with that, in my opinion, is speed. You're talking about Javonte Williams, a 4.62, 4.63 kind of guy. Obviously, that was a pro day. Actually ran a 4.58, whatever you want to call it. However you determine your pro day times. Then Jonathan Taylor, is a 4.4 guy. That is something that is relevant when you talk about Jonathan Taylor running a spread option. You get out to the outside and you're not getting caught, so you're not forcing any tackles because you're fast enough to get away from guys. Whereas with Jonathan Taylor or Javonte Williams, like inside a box, he can shake you out. He can maneuver around you. He can push you off. He relies more on his strength and his speed, which is not a knock on him, but I think it limits upside. I've had this conversation a million times. Some people say that broken tackles and breakaway runs don't impact fantasy production as much as I say it does. But in my opinion, you're talking about film, you're talking about these kind of things that give you more fantasy points. I don't necessarily want a guy who's going to give me a 30-yard rush every few carries. I want a guy who has the opportunity to break away on an 80-yard touchdown run. Yeah. It's not a knock on Javonte Williams. It's just when you're talking about these high-level assets, these top-tier players in the NFL, you have to scrutinize the babyest of things. You know what I mean? Yep. Obviously, Javonte Williams is one of the best running backs in the league at this point. Top 15, I would say, at minimum. Somebody could argue with me on that, but I doubt it. That means he's going to be good for fantasy production as long as he gets carries. But you're talking about put him in the top 5, top 3 of dynasty running backs. You need him to be elite. You need him to be as good as possible. And I think you have to just bring up all the little things that could inhibit or I don't know what you want to call it, but
Yeah, I think
hinder his fantasy production.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, JT every year is on that, whatever the metric is where they track the top speed for plays every year.
Yeah, it's like
he's got 2 or 3
of
the top
3 in the top 5 this year.
Yeah, it's crazy. The guy's unreal.
Fourth most career yards per game. Isn't that insane?
Yeah.
Fourth most, just behind like Barry Sanders and a couple other legends. You know what I mean? That's just insane. Obviously, the O-line's good, but it's just insane.
I'll throw this out there. I've put this out there a couple times. Get your thoughts, Spence, since you're firmly in the JT camp here. Just quick initial gut reaction. I moved him in a rebuild this year to get Javonte and what ended up being, I think, the 108 and 112.
Yeah, in a rebuild, I'll take that all day. Obviously, I hate selling Jonathan Taylor.
I know,
but
I'm still torn.
So the reason I would say I'd take it is because I imagine you took this at some point mid-season where someone was benefiting from Jonathan Taylor. So you didn't really care as much about Javonte Williams' production. But if you look at consensus, you look at dynasty values and all that stuff, that's the important thing when you're talking about a rebuild where you don't care about fantasy points. You just care about their value. How much can I trade this player for? So you're talking about 2 first-round picks and Javonte Williams for Jonathan Taylor. You could trade Javonte Williams for something comparable to Jonathan Taylor this offseason because of how crazy his valuations are going to be based on Melvin Gordon news and what quarterback the Broncos get. If it's Aaron Rodgers, oh my God, you know what I mean? I think he did really well. I would definitely try to ship Javonte Williams before he plays a snap this coming year because I think the odds are, based on where his value is right now, that it can only kind of go down, especially with Breece Hall coming in. Personally, I think Breece Hall might be a better prospect. We'll have to see based on draft capital, landing spot, and testing numbers and all that stuff. But Javonte Williams, I think if you can sell him before he takes a snap for a comparable value to what he was worth during the season, then you're just sitting pretty. You know what I mean? Definitely go out, try to get like a wide receiver. And then with your 2 picks, try to grab a quarterback and a wide receiver or something like that. I think you'd be in a better position than just having Jonathan Taylor on your roster for 2 years.
I love this conversation, and I know Spence can go all day about.
I'm sorry,
Jake.
I just talked forever. No, you got to cut me off.
It's all good. It's all good because I love the conversation. I love the back and forth. So I'm gonna let you guys talk it out for as long as you want. This tweet came in from Dynasty Sags at Dynasty Sags. What side in a super flex? Stafford and Cup or Jefferson, Carr, and Hunt? This is an interesting one here. So, Drew, why don't you go first? Which side do you got here?
If there's a guy that I love as much or possibly even more than Jonathan Taylor and Javonte Williams, it is Justin Jefferson. This was a snap vote for me. I didn't even have to think about this twice. As good as Cooper Kupp was this year, that's fine. I love the stack of Stafford and Kupp, and I hope Stafford goes and wins it all this year. I love the guy. I love the grit that he's shown in his career arc. So I hope he gets it. But I think if I'm in a dynasty league, I'm fine dropping from Stafford to Carr, especially if it's my QB2. And I want that longevity and the upside of Justin Jefferson here. And, Kareem Hunt's a nice throw in. I'll probably flip him for a pick or something like that early in the season to somebody who's contending, unless I'm contending with this roster. And then great, he's a great bye week guy or possible flex play. So for me, it was pretty easy. I want Jefferson, who's, in my opinion, the best asset of the group.
Yeah, I love Matt Stafford. I've loved Matt Stafford for a very long time. But it's the Justin Jefferson side. I mean, come on. I mean, if we broke this down by where we would take these guys in a startup, Justin Jefferson would be far and ahead of probably everyone else that we're talking about in this trade, even Cooper Kupp, because, I mean, Cooper Kupp's going to be, 28, 29?
29, yeah.
So
Well, he's 27 right now, I think, and he'll be 28.
All right, so you know how the dynasty community is. 28, he can't play no more. He's not good, and I think he's going to be good. But we saw the best Cooper Kupp we're ever going to see.
Yeah.
He had a historic year. That's not just me talking. He had a historic year.
He is 28. He'll be 29 in June.
Oh, so he's gonna be 29 going into the season. That's even worse.
Yeah,
we hate him more now. He's just 1 year away from 30, and that's when everybody in Dynasty dies.
One of the best advice that you can give. Okay, so we just looked it up, right? We know in June he's gonna turn 29. I guarantee you most fantasy managers. I just said he's 27. I think he's turning 28 before the season. That most managers aren't going to pay attention to that. So you're on Sleeper, you're on MFL where it says their age right on the app. People aren't going to know that he's going to turn 29 tomorrow based on the app. You know what I mean? It doesn't say their birthday. So one of the best advice I think you can give as far as Dynasty goes is sell those guys literally as soon as you can before their age changes. You know what I mean? Kupp is 28 right now. We already think 28 sucks. But I'll tell you what, a lot of people are going to think 29 is worse. You know what I mean? So 100%. If you sell him literally the day before his birthday, it will give you more than afterwards because people just won't know. The guy's going to think, oh, it's 28. I have another year before he turns 29. I'm going to sell him in the next offseason. It's not going to be a huge impact. But then turns out 29. You know what I mean?
So, Spence, which side would you take in this deal?
So personally, I'm smashing the Jefferson side, especially in 10 or 12 team. Where Derek Carr is Matthew Stafford as far as fantasy production, not that different. Obviously, Stafford has a little bit of a higher ceiling. Derek Carr is dealing with worse weapons. Obviously, the head coach situation there is miserable, but it's comparable. You slot him into your QB2 slot. You weren't getting Stafford at QB1 price. Even after the trade, I don't think he wasn't in that tier. So you're talking about Derek Carr and Stafford. They're both QB2s. Doesn't matter that much. You're starting them in the QB2 slot. Hunt is just a nice throw-in. Maybe he goes somewhere this year. Whatever. Maybe Chubb gets hurt again. You play Hunt a couple games. But Jefferson over Kupp, that's, 6 years we're talking about, 5 years. You just got to take that. Jefferson's a first-round pick, and Kupp is probably a fourth-round pick at this point. So that's just too far of a discrepancy. And I think it's worth noting that the poll was on the other side of all three of us, which means go acquire Justin Jefferson. People are too low on Justin Jefferson. Or maybe they're too high in Cooper Kupp. So go sell your Cooper Kupp shares or your Matthew Stafford shares, whatever.
What's funny is their birthday is 1 day apart. Kupp is June 15th.
Cooper Kupp?
And Justin Jefferson is June 16th. There's crazy. 6 years of difference between them otherwise.
That's crazy.
and
that's hilarious.
Spence, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's more of a overvaluation on Cooper Kupp than it is an undervaluation on Justin Jefferson, because way too many people who play both Dynasty and Redraft, they look at the prior year's stats and think that they're going to repeat within a small range of outcomes. Yep. And there are a lot of players that are consistent, but we just saw if we would have guessed what Cooper Kupp's 2021 season would have been based on his 2020 season, we would have missed the boat completely. And if you look at his ADP, we did miss the boat completely. So it's not,
Well, if you look at his 2019 season, you still would have missed the bar.
Oh,
you know what I mean? You'd have just been like, oh, I like Cooper Kupp because Matthew Stafford is a good quarterback. I think they might score a lot of touchdowns this year. Cooper Kupp tends to be the guy in the red zone. You'd have been like, okay, I'll take Cooper Kupp a little earlier than normal. You still would have missed the mark. You still would have not fully actualized his potential. And that just means that there's such a huge margin of error there that it's unlikely for that to happen again, in my opinion. And like you said.
I love it. So let's move on to this next one here. This is from Zachy at Zachy NFL. 12-team PPR Dynasty Superflex. Which side do you prefer? We got Dak Prescott and the rookie 201, or Deshaun Watson and the rookie 102. So Drew, why don't you start us off here? Are you taking Dak in the later pick, or are you taking Deshaun Watson and the earlier pick?
Man. I didn't read this closely enough when I was looking at it earlier.
Do you want us to skip you?
No. I think I am. I think I'm on the Watson in the early pick. We talked about this a little bit before. You know, Watson when he's fully playing again, he'll be going before Dak, I think, in a lot of drafts, or you'll be able to get Dak plus. Even if you don't like Watson, and I know there's folks out there, you know, trade guys away after they've been, you know, accused of stuff like this. But as far as the value goes, you know, Watson has so much room to grow in value depending on which leagues you're in. And then that 102, whether you want to spend it or not, come April, come May, once we see some landing spots and draft capital changes like Spence has been talking about, there are going to be some people in your leagues that are going to be, you know, really excited about that 102, and you could probably cash in really nicely based on that. So I think based on value, we've talked about this, the non-point scoring season, it's all about getting the best value for what you can for your team. I think I land on the Watson in the 102 side.
All right, Spence, I saw you. Your brain, it exploded. Your mind was blown. Which side do you have here?
So one of the fun things about dynasty trade polls and all that kind of stuff is, and I have one in here. We might get to it later. We might not. But so some people mention whether you're a contender or you think you're a contender, or if you're in a rebuild or if you're just a middle of the pack team. And I think those kind of things are relevant. So Deshaun Watson and rookie 102, that's a very rebuild heavy side, because you're talking about Deshaun Watson, hasn't been dealt any punishment, any discipline of any kind so far, but didn't play this whole season. You're talking about the Texans. Obviously, there was that whole situation. We don't have to talk about it. But you're talking about that new head coach and what he had to deal with Davis Mills and Tyrod Taylor, and they had Deshaun Watson on the roster the whole time. They didn't play. So I think it's relatively guaranteed that he's missing time either this year or he just doesn't play again at all this year, and then he misses time next year. So that's very rebuild heavy. And then you're talking about in Superflex drafts, Deshaun Watson could totally be drafted before Dak Prescott in the coming future. 100% possible. But there's some risk there. And I think Deshaun Watson is a risky asset, so it's almost negative rebuild. You know, you don't want to invest in a non-safe asset. You want to invest in like assets that are like relatively safe, like wide receivers, you know what I mean? Or like tight ends, like Kyle Pitts is a great rebuild player to have. And the rookie 102 is a great rebuild item to have. But Deshaun Watson is someone I'm not too interested in having on a rebuild. It's more of like a middle of the pack. Deshaun Watson plays next year, like, and he goes really hard, like, and I get Breece Hall at the 102, like, this team's going to be nuts going into this year. You know what I mean? So I get why that side could be enticing. But you're talking about Dak Prescott, who just got paid $1 bajillion and was totally solid this year. Like, wasn't the best quarterback ever, but, like, you're playing him every year no matter what. Like, you're playing every game. You know what I mean? You're not pulling him out of the lineup. You know, he's not – I wouldn't say he's a QB2. He's still in that QB1 talk as far as fantasy point production. So you're not pulling him out of the lineup. And then you're talking about a rookie 201. This class is very deep, in my opinion, in wide receiver. Obviously, like you said, Drew, and like I've been trying to say throughout this draft, everything's going to change with draft capital and landing spot and testing numbers from the combine and all that, whether they have one, pro days, whatever. So 201, I think you get a really solid wide receiver. Worst case scenario, you might pick up another QB. And everybody knows what QBs are like in Superflex. You're talking about this draft right now. It's weak at QB, but it's not so weak where like, oh, none of these guys could start. It's like these guys could get drafted in the late first, early second, and then still become fantasy relevant. You're talking about the 201, you know, obviously Dak Prescott, like you said, 4th round pick, Russell Wilson, 3rd round pick, whatever. These are Malik Willis is kind of a guy like that could be in that where you see fantasy production early. 201 is comparable enough to 102 where Dak Prescott and Deshaun Watson, that disparity is like not enough, I don't think, in my opinion. So for me, I think it's a smash Dak Prescott side. I think it's actually super cheap. But I understand why there's that super high upside with Deshaun Watson if he doesn't face any punishment or if he does play a majority of this coming year. Like, it could be really big for a contender.
Yeah, it's very interesting seeing both sides of this. I lean with Drew here on the Watson side, just because personally I have more confidence that he's going to play this year. Based on some of the early articles on it, it
Mhm.
looks like Deshaun Watson is going to try to come to a settlement with his accusers, and
Well,
and
what I'll bring up with that though is the issue is he could come to a settlement and then still the NFL decides the
well,
punishment.
and I do think that's going to happen.
Mhm.
I think he's going to get hit with a 6 game or
He'll
eight
miss
game
something.
suspension. I don't think it's going to be a full year suspension, but I do think he is going to miss a good amount of games. I think
Yeah.
it 6, 8, it could even be 10 games that he misses. Um,
But then
but I
what if there's the issue of so you're talking about you're erring on the side of the good, I guess you could call it, whereas he doesn't face any punishment outside of the NFL. Now you have to I mean, even if you think based on your articles or whatever, that that is the way it's going to happen, you still have to remember that it could go to court, could be jail time, could be whatever. I think that's something that people are almost, I don't want to say forgetting about, but it's just something that you have to pay attention to. And then that correlates to value. So until those things are guaranteed out of the picture, the managers you're trying to trade with are always going to also have that in their mind. So I think that's why I think this Dak deal is so cheap is because Watson is just valued so low. Regardless of what you think of what he could do in the future, or if he's actually even better than Dak Prescott, it almost doesn't matter just because we don't want to lose value when we could trade Dak Prescott for the rookie 103 and someone who's totally more safe, like Trey Lance. You know what I mean? Where we know he's going to start next year and he's got fantasy upside. Where with Deshaun Watson, we don't know if he's going to start. Could face Jay time, all these other kind of things. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and um, I think you're 100% right with that. And I think as long as you have Deshaun Watson, even if he plays, you have to worry about that. But reading articles written by people who know the law, because trust me, I'm no lawyer, so I'm
Me
not going to
neither.
sit. I'm not
Yeah.
going to sit here and pretend that I am. But a lot of them say that every day that passes without criminal charges being filed, the odds of criminal charges actually being filed go down. Uh,
Mhm.
just because time passes, memories fade. So unless someone comes up with a piece of physical evidence, um, it it looks like the odds of Deshaun Watson being charged criminally go down. Now, obviously, 3 years from now, someone can pull that piece of evidence out of somewhere and present it, and then boom, here are criminal charges. But
Yeah.
um, just obviously, this is why I read people who know these things, because if I just tried to do this on my own, I couldn't even start. So, um, but yeah, I mean, Deshaun Watson is going to be a huge risk, I think, until he is on another team and the NFL decides what his punishment is going to be.
Yeah.
Um, but we know the talent, and if you kind of if you're looking at it from my point of view, it's like, all right, this is dynasty. Even if he gets sacked with the entire season, let's just say the league goes 17 games, you're suspended, you don't play this season. All right, cool. You have a guy who every time we've seen him play has been a top 3, 4 quarterback in the
Yeah.
league. Plus, you have this 102, which can turn into a bunch of other things. So,
Yeah.
but listen, this is what makes the game fun. Is
Oh
that
yeah.
we can
100%.
look at this thing from totally. And Spence, you say it's a smash, and I will not say it's a smash on the Watson side, because I actually think this is, in my opinion, it's a pretty even deal.
Yeah.
I lean slightly more towards the Watson side, but somebody else could think the opposite and go, "Oh man, this is a smash on the Watson side," and that's what makes
Yeah.
the game fun, because it's like we can look at this deal from two totally opposite points of view and think that we both want it. We
Made out.
boom,
Yeah.
like, hey, you got what you wanted. You like Dak. You know, you don't want the risk of Deshaun Watson. And I could look at it and be like, oh man, Deshaun Watson, you know, he's out there. I got, you know, one of the
He's
best
playing.
quarterbacks
Yeah.
in the league, and I got this 102.
Well,
So
one thing I'll say too is it's interesting. You talk about the disparity between managers. You talk about the different methods of evaluation and everything like that. So for me personally, I try to take in the least amount of actionable content, if that makes sense. So for you, you have the advantage of knowing more of the situation and then applying that information towards your process. So for you, you're saying you know X, Y, and Z about Deshaun Watson and his situation, and that leads you to believe that he's a better asset moving forward. Whereas I just say I know all of the information and I'm not going to make a decision on any of it because it's out of my control and I can't use my personally, I'm a heavy analytics guy. You know,
yes.
I can't. There's no way for me to put this into a code and determine the most likely outcome of this event. So for me personally, it's just totally random. So when I look at Deshaun Watson, there's just a random chance of 33% to be he's never playing football again, 33% to be he misses the whole season, 33% to be he misses 6 games. And for me, that risk is too high. But for you, because you have that advice or you have that information and you're going to use it actionably, you know, and you're leaning towards the 33% that is 6 games only, that's leading you to make this decision. Whereas me, I'm trying to not take those information into account at all. You know what I mean? Because there's going to be there's just too many situations, you know. Deshaun Watson is a high profile player, so you're able to distinguish with him. Whereas like maybe some other guy who's just Joe Schmo, like Dwayne Eskridge, you know, for example, like you're not paying attention to his information in his case like as deeply. So when you look at him, you're not gonna be able to apply the same process and come to the same conclusions. Whereas with me, I can kind of still just say, you know, based on this risk and based on this information, you know, I'm out. You know, I'm not gonna dive too deep into determining the best course of action. I'm just going to decide based on the possibilities that there's too many that are bad. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's just kind of where I'm at, and then that's where you're at. And I think that, like you said, is the best part about Dynasty. Everybody has their own way of doing it, and both people can win. You know,
that's what makes the market, right?
Yeah, come a year from now, it could just be a totally straight up even deal. Deshaun Watson is playing in 2023. We're all good to go. You got the 102 with Breece Hall or whatever. And I'm sitting still with Dak Prescott and Joe Schmo wide receiver. It doesn't matter, you know.
And that's the thing. Obviously, as we said earlier, the risk is still on the Deshaun Watson side. But if they both play, I don't think either side of this deal is mad. Yeah. You know, at that point, they go, "Oh man, you know, like, all right, Deshaun Watson is playing, he's doing his thing. Dak Prescott's playing, he's doing his thing." And I think that's a deal that, you know, if that happens, everyone ends up happy. But we got a question in the chat here, so I want to bring this up. Steve, our boy Steve Dennis, he said, if you felt a little gamble, what's it going to take to get Jimmy G on a roster for 2022? Say 12-team super flex. So, Steve, I'm going to start this out here. It's going to take you 2 firsts and a second to get Jimmy G. And I say that to Steve because Steve is in the Fantasy Timeline OG Listener League, and he, our team, me and Bill, we have Jimmy G on the roster right now. So he's trying to get one over.
First.
Yeah, so 2 firsts and a second, and Jimmy G is all yours. He said sent. I'll wait for the email to come on my phone, letting me know that I got a deal coming in. But it's actually a good question because we know Jimmy G is out of San Francisco.
100%.
He's done. He had a nice run. I think everyone there really appreciates him and everything that he did. He did take him to a Super Bowl. He took him to an NFC Championship game. And it might be a little wild to say he took them, but he was the starting quarterback for those teams. Well, I'll put it that way. Yeah. So, but when we talk about the mass amount of quarterback openings that they're going to be, Jimmy G is going to end up in one of them, you know.
100%.
maybe it's Tampa. Okay, that might not be so good with probably the talent that's going to be leaving Tampa. Maybe he goes to Pittsburgh. He's got Chase. He's got Chase Claypool. Excuse me, I said Chase like Jamar Chase. Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, Najee's there. Some good talented weapons. Maybe Denver strikes out and they take the Jimmy G backup plan. So, and Steve brought this up. He said, but competition or starter. Jimmy G's starting somewhere next year. Jimmy G is not signing somewhere to be a competition guy or the veteran backup. There are too many openings in the league right now for Jimmy G to not sign a starting contract.
And too little good quarterbacks coming in.
Correct.
We just had 5 good quarterbacks come in. 5 first-round quarterbacks enter the league.
Yep.
And there's probably 1, maybe 2 in this draft.
Yeah.
Maybe. Could be 0. Honestly.
Could be. It could be.
So, I think Jimmy Garoppolo is 100% worth a buy. 100% going to be starting next year. I think if you can get him for anything less than a second, anything second or less is totally worth it. In a 12-team Superflex, you're not going to get that return on a second round. I would say it's tough to say because the early second wide receivers are looking pretty good right now. But if you're talking about like 204 and back, I would be heavily interested in Jimmy Garoppolo. And you can definitely get him cheaper than that. You should definitely be able to get him cheaper than that, than a 205,
What do you think, Drew? What if you were in the Jimmy Garoppolo market? What would you be willing to pay to get him?
I'd be pretty happy with almost any second.
Yeah.
It depends on what you've got on your team, but I think almost any second I'd be very happy adding him to my roster for that. If it's funny, Josh, I've got him in our 14-team league on Sleeper, and I'm wondering, am I going to get any offers for him from other teams that maybe just need a QB3 or something like that? So I don't think I'd let him go for much more or much less than a late first if I could squeeze that in Superflex. But if I can get him, I think I might actually send a couple offers out now that I'm thinking about it in some of these leagues where there's one league I've got Mahomes and Allen, and Jordan loves my QB3 right now. And I'd love to add Jimmy G for a mid 2 or a mid 2 and a third if I could.
And I think if Jimmy G is a guy you have to get on your team for whatever reason that's in your head, you have to get him on your team. You got to do it now, because
100%.
If free agency happens, let's say, like I said earlier, Denver strikes out. They don't get Watson. They don't get Aaron Rodgers. And they go, okay, Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be our guy. He's not going to get a huge value spike, but he's going to get a value spike because they're going to be, now he has Jerry Jeudy, he has Tim Patrick, he has Cortland Sutton, he has Noah Fant, he's got Javonte. Yeah. Like we're gonna hype this up, whether we should or we shouldn't is besides the point. This is what we're going to do. And then all of a sudden, like Drew said, maybe before the signing, you could have gotten Jimmy for, let's just say, the 203 or the 204. Now that's probably going to be the 111 or the 112 that you're going to need to get to convince the Jimmy G owner that he doesn't have this kind of diamond in the rough now that he's on a team with this, mass, or even if it's Pittsburgh with Najee and Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, so, yeah.
You guys think he starts for a high probability he starts next year?
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, 100% he starts.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is interesting too with Jimmy is I think in a lot of your leagues, we were talking about Superflex, and this could apply to 1 QB, but this already applies to 1 QB in almost every trade. With Superflex, though, in the climate that we're in right now, you're talking about Trey Lance and how much hype he has and everything. I think you could reasonably send a trade for a player that you like say, I don't know, Amon-Ra St. Brown or something. You could send a trade for that guy with, say, a mid to late first and just throw Jimmy G in with it, to receive Jimmy G, Yeah. And I think they just might be okay, whatever. You know what I mean? I feel like Jimmy G is he's not like a high caliber enough player where you really need to go out and send a second for him. You know,
Right.
I feel like you could just send a trade offer for somebody else that you like, and then just like add Jimmy G to that trade, and maybe throw a third in with it or a fourth, and they'll probably just be like, all right, whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Everybody's looking at Jimmy G right now, like, okay, well, this guy isn't, you know what I mean? He's like a backup. You know, it's like they just threw in Jordan Love, you know, because I'm not expecting Jordan Love to start next year. So, like, or whoever, you know what I mean?
Right.
Cam Newton. You just threw in Cam Newton with that. Like, okay, whatever. Sam Darnold or Jared Goff.
Right.
Like, who cares? You know what I mean? I think he could be in that tier for some people, for some managers, you know?
And I think that's I love that you said that because I think that really is the play. Go get your guy. Well, like let's say you want CeeDee Lamb, right?
Yeah.
And that guy has, you know, Jimmy G too. So you build your trade around getting CeeDee Lamb and just go, oh, I'm offering you, let's say 3 pieces, you know, for CeeDee Lamb. Can you throw in Jimmy G? Jimmy G? Yeah, go ahead. Like I don't care. Like these 3 pieces that you're offering me are great. You can have Jimmy G on top. I don't care. Like Jimmy G is worthless to me. And that I think is more of the play than just saying, hey, Jimmy G for 205. What do you think? You know?
Yeah. Like
now,
I feel like you're selling yourself too short by like just giving him a second. Like when you could probably get him just as a throw in almost.
Or
maybe you have to add a third. Maybe you send a trade with CeeDee Lamb and Jimmy G, and they're like, I don't know, it's kind of close. Like, could you add a little something? And you like throw him Amon-Ra St. Brown, or not Amon-Ra St. Brown, but you throw him a third or a fourth,
right?
You know, or you throw him down when people's jumps, you know, something like that.
Or if you want, you wait until draft day, and you're on the clock at, you know, let's say 211, and everyone is all hot and bothered because it's the rookie draft now. People have been coming off the board. There's some guy that only you know about that like is going to be the next big thing. Hey man, I got the 211. I could honestly pick 3 guys right here. How about you just give me Jimmy G? I'll let you have this pick and you pick the guy that you love. Oh, okay, cool. And then all of a sudden, maybe before the draft, the guy's like, well, I wouldn't give up Jimmy G for anything lower than, you know, the 204. But now that it's the rookie draft.
Now that this guy left, now that this guy went to the 211, all right, here you go.
Oh, yeah, like I know about this guy from, you know, North Dakota State that nobody else knows about. I'm going to get him in that 211. And then like, aha, I got you. And you all I had to do was give up Jimmy G. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. And that's a play I personally love doing during rookie drafts is like, I got this pick. Like, you know, I gave up in a draft, I gave up the 109 last year and got Stephon Diggs. Like, you know, before the draft, nobody is making that trade. Like the 109, like and we loved the class last year, but even then we weren't like.
But they saw Clark. Who did they see? Javonte Williams there, and they were like,
they saw Javonte or Jalen Waddle or Devonta Smith or something, and they were like, all right, Leona, let's
Mac Jones,
you know, something like that, and they're like, hey, let's get paid and let's, you know, so that's a move I like too. So if you're like, I need Jimmy G in my life, you can either take the Spence approach and just get him like a little sprinkle on a bigger deal. Or you can take my approach and just wait till draft day. And I mean, hell, I wouldn't even be surprised if it's the 301 and you go, hey man, I got a couple of sleepers here. You can have this pick and I'll just give me Jimmy G. Oh, yeah. Jimmy G stinks, man. He, you know, now obviously if he goes to a team with weapons, you might not be able to pull that move off, but you know,
it's a risk, you know.
But sometimes people like they just love picks so much that they don't really care and they'll do whatever they can to get them. So, all right, we got time for one more. This is from Dynasty Superflex at Dynasty Super, and you know we'll take this one quickly so that we don't go too far over the 130 that we usually try to stick to. But Zeke is 26, Pollard is 24. I don't understand why people who say they would rather have Pollard. Zeke was the RB6 this year, people. He's mad. He wants you to stop disrespecting RB6 Zeke Elliott for the new hotness, Tony Pollard. So, Drew, why don't we start with you first? Do you agree with this? Should we be disrespecting Zeke in favor of Tony Pollard, or are we putting a little bit too much hype on Tony Pollard's name?
Yeah, I mean, if you're telling me straight up, do I want one or the other? I'll still take Zeke. I'll take the guy that's gotten the opportunity, that's produced. I get the allure of Pollard. I've had him on a couple of rosters, and I was actually able to swing him and Baker to get Deshaun Watson in one league because somebody was so excited about Pollard. So sure, if he's your guy, go get him. This is fun. But if you're telling me, value wise, I'll still take Zeke. If you're gonna, it depends on what the other pieces you're going to give me with Pollard. But if it's straight up, I'll still take Zeke, who's, when he's healthy and he's going well, he's a great player. An RB6, it's tough to disagree with that. He's getting older. The cliff is coming, but we'll see if he actually hits the cliff, or if, again, he kind of backs off and gradually declines over the next 2 seasons. That's fine. If he's RB10 this year, cool. I'll take an RB1 for him.
There you go. Spence, what do you think about this one?
So yeah, I agree with what you're saying there, Drew. Basically, I do want to say I like the trade. I know we talked about Deshaun Watson earlier, but Baker Mayfield and Pollard for Deshaun Watson, that's a smash for me, mainly because I'm not big on Baker Mayfield, but or Pollard, to be honest. I think that the issue here is that, like you mentioned, the value and the straight upness and all that goodness. Like, yes, we'll take Zeke because we know he produces and he's produced. And he technically has the workload right now. But the issue is that the community has already shifted. And from that point forward, it's kind of like that's the end game. Like A.J. Dillon with Aaron Jones. It's just shifted. Even though Aaron Jones is still the lead back, everyone's like, well, A.J. Dillon is younger and they're in the same backfield. So I'm going to take the other guy now, And so basically you just have to make the decision. Do I want the guy who's more likely to score me fantasy points this season, or do I want the guy who's going to maintain value even if he doesn't score fantasy points this season? So that's the issue with Pollard and Dillon, is that even if they don't play as much as you want them to this year, the hype will still continue into next year because they're younger and they have another year to take over. So personally, I'll take the Zeke side straight up. And also I want to mention I love Dynasty Superflex, big fan. But one thing with his tweet that is a little, I don't know what you want to call it, misleading, is that RB6 is like, I'm assuming fantasy finish, which isn't that relevant. Like, I don't like using fantasy finishes for much of anything because it basically just means he was healthy most of the year. And he played. So you talk about points per game. I don't have it up right now, but I'm assuming it was either just inside or just outside of RB1, which is still good, but like 26, 15, just outside. Like, that's not, I'm not like crazy about that. That's replaceable level production. It was nice that you were able to start him every game, but I'm not in love with either of these guys, to be honest. Like, I'll take A.J. Dillon over either of them, and and that's a similar conversation to be had between A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. So, but yeah, like you said, we're getting close to the time. So, what are your thoughts, Josh?
Just as a Cowboys fan and somebody who watches every single game, I think people have become enamored with the idea of Tony Pollard. He's younger. He's more explosive when he's on the field. You see those longer runs. You see the pass catching chops that you used to see from Zeke and you don't see as much anymore. And we go, oh man, if this guy was out here all the time, like, this is what it would be. But I think there's a good reason why he's not out there all the time, because if he was, we would not see what we see when we get him in small doses. I have a lot of Tony Pollard, and that's because I could get Tony Pollard for a very cheap price. I don't think that is really a thing anymore, or at least not what you used to be able to get him for. So in the few leagues that I have that I don't have Tony Pollard, I don't expect to get Tony Pollard because I have a feeling that asking price is going to be too high. Because just like Spence said, points per game, RB15, that's replaceable. And people are going to go, well, what is it going to get replaced with? It's going to get replaced with Tony Pollard. And I know you meant Spence more in a, you can get other fantasy players.
Yeah.
But
I'll grab Elijah Mitchell.
Exactly. But I still think people are going to say, well, he's not actually that good when he's on the field. Dallas is going to see this, and Dallas is going to, split it.
I'm not a big fan of that. Yeah.
And Dallas has shown you that they're not.
Yeah.
Even when Zeke was hobbling during certain games, and they were still feeding him. It's almost like they wanted him to get injured. And the dude is just so tough and stubborn that he did it. I mean, apparently he had a torn PCL according to him.
Yeah, it came out at the end of the season.
Whatever. I don't know if I've seen an actual medical report yet. That's I'm not calling Zeke a liar, but sometimes if you don't have a good game or a good season, you go, my knee was hurt, my back was hurt, my this was hurt.
Yeah.
To kind of talk it away. But Dallas has shown you. They are going to keep going with Zeke. Maybe it's because they're paying him way more money than they should. That's a possibility. Maybe they just see what I see, and that if you decide you're going to all of a sudden flip the roles and you're going to make Tony Pollard the main guy and Zeke the kind of back that spells him, you're not going to get the same results.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're also paying the guy I don't even know. I don't even want to say the number because it's just so much more than Tony Pollard.
It's
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, so you have to get everything you can out of him.
Exactly.
Exactly. And another thing is too, you're talking about, when he's on the field, he does this with Tony Pollard. That is great, but I'm not a huge fan of the small sample size, high efficiency running backs. I know that is a market. There is a market for that on Twitter and dynasty communities. I know some people love that. Rashad Penny and Tony Pollard, AJ Dillon, Cam Akers last year, a little bit. I'm not that guy. I prefer, I said it earlier, good coaches play good players. It's the same with running backs. Not saying Tony Pollard is bad, but the chances he's better than Ezekiel Elliott are low. I think they would have already just played him over him if it was actually that prominent of a showing. So for it to expect it to happen coming forward is just, I think, a bad bet. And I think the only reason you should do something like that is because you're betting on value. And I think, like we touched on earlier, the odds are Pollard's value is just going to be higher than Zeke's for the rest of their careers going forward.
Exactly. And that's the reason why I bought so much Pollard earlier in his career, because it was cheap and he's a nice injury bye week fill-in type guy. Oh, Tony Pollard, he could take one, to the house and kind of win you a week.
Like Alexander Madison.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of guys that you like having as RB4, RB5,
RB6. Throw him, he's on my bench. Oh shoot, Cook's down, slap him in. It's that easy. It's that easy.
Oh man, my top two guys have the same bye week this year. All right, Tony Pollard, you're going to be playing in week 7 because
and
these
then
guys
he gives you 10 points because he caught 4 passes. And you're like, all right, cool.
Yeah, you're happy about it. So that's the thing. But yeah, I mean, Spence, you and I both kind of said the same thing that and nothing is changing in Dallas. It's going to be the same head coach. It's going to be the same offensive coordinator. So I don't know why we would expect anything to change. I could understand if they hired a new head coach and
they could restructure that Ezekiel Elliott deal. I think that might be possible.
Oh God, just.
So if they did that, it could open up possibilities. Because I mean, you got to chase the money. You got to follow the money.
Yep.
Very important. Earlier this year, I was debating between who were the Lions wide receivers. I can't even remember. It was Tyrell Williams and
Josh Reynolds.
Not Josh Reynolds.
No, he wasn't on the team yet.
Tyrell Williams and
who was the other guy?
Who the heck was it? Was it a Raider? No, Tyrell Williams was a Raider.
Who was the Raider?
Anyway, the point is, it was some vet.
Quintez Cephas?
No, not Cephas. It was some vet. But basically everybody was like, "Oh, it's gonna be this guy," and I was like, "No, Tyrell Williams. He got paid like $2.3 million more. You know what I mean?" And then the other guy got cut like right before the season or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah, go me." And then like 3 weeks into the season, the other guy was like off the roster, and it was like, I was like, I got taught a lesson. Like, okay, money matters, but like not that much. You know what I mean?
I think big money matters.
Yeah, true.
I think that's the thing. I mean, especially, we're talking about Zeke here, who, like I said earlier, is going to pay way too much. Big money matters.
Who is that guy?
So, especially, we see this again. We're going to see this, in free agency. We talked about a little bit with Kenny Galladay to bring it full circle. Kenny Galladay is, Brian Dable is going to build an offense where Kenny Galladay is going to try to get featured because they're paying him so much money that they got to get something out of the investment. So I like that. Money doesn't always matter, but big money always matters, and I think that's the important takeaway here. So, Drew, man, dude, we did it, man. Another week in the books, another great episode, another great guest. I mean, can we do any better? I guess that's next week's. That's
Every week, man. 1% better.
That's a problem for us next week. We, I think we did pretty damn good this week. So, Spence, on your way out, tell everybody where they can find you, what you're up to. You found him?
Rashad Perriman.
That's who it was.
Everybody was like, Rashad Perriman. I was like, no, Tyrell Williams. Like, he already had a good season. Like, yeah, but anyway.
And the correct answer was Amon-Ra St. Brown.
It was neither. Exactly. It was neither Tyrell or Rashad Perriman.
But I give you a lot of respect for fighting that fight, because when people talk to me about Lions receivers, I said TJ Hawkinson, and don't talk to me about nothing else. I don't care.
Nobody else.
I don't care. Don't talk to me about your Amon-Ra St. Browns and your Tyrell Williams and your Rashad Perrimans and your Danny Amendolas and whoever else was on that team stinking it up. I don't want to talk
Quintez Cephas.
Yeah, that guy's good. He got hurt. That guy's good.
Oh, my God.
Don't hate.
He was doing good.
Oh, my God. How much did he pay you, Spence?
Hey.
I mean, all right. So I won't get into it. But basically, coming into this year, the only player that wasn't drafted in the first 3 rounds that I liked was Darnell Mooney. But Quintez Cephas was like, oh, it was so close. Like, I almost wanted a gun for him, but it just wasn't there enough. And then at the beginning of the season, I was like, damn, I should have bought into more Cephas. And then he got hurt, and I was like, all right, well, that's a wrap.
And we're talking to an analytics guy here, okay? So the numbers don't lie, Drew. Quintez Cephas, good.
He wasn't nothing special, but he was a guy who I thought could do well.
I think because there was nobody else there.
Yeah, with limited competition.
Hey, listen.
But he did. I mean, it still takes something to do that. You know what I mean?
Amon-Ra needed the entire team to go to the hospital before.
I'm super out on Amon-Ra. I'll tell you right now. Dude's overpriced to the moon. I'm never gonna have a share.
Me and Spence are on the same wavelength with this. I wish I had any Amon-Ra St. Brown because
I could just sell them.
Yes,
sell them.
I would have been like, all you're going to.
What's the least you're taking in terms of 22 picks for him, Spence?
The least? I mean, I'd take a second.
Any second? 212?
Like the same what we were talking about with like Jimmy Garoppolo. I'd take like a 204. But you could get like a 105, I think, right now. You know what I mean? Which is just insane.
I'm in a startup, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm going to look it up right now so I don't misspeak, but I believe Amon-Ra St. Brown
6th round
went before Hunter Renfrow. Like, that's crazy.
That's a sin.
I don't know. I honestly don't care about that.
That's crazy.
I actually say, personally, I'll take Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I don't like Amon-Ra St. Brown, but the issue with Hunter Renfrow is, like, he's been in the league for so many years, and then he did really well this year. He did decent last year. There's good progression. If you're talking about Amon-Ra St. Brown, he was able to do his rookie year. It's more important to be able to do it rookie year. And neither of them are very good analytically, in my opinion. So you're talking about just pure production at an early stage in their career. Monterey State Broncos the edge. But let me know what draft pick he was taking, because you're talking about you got kicker replacements or something for the draft picks in the startup.
Yeah, exactly.
So where was he taken in respect to that? Like in between what picks?
All right,
Because that's going to be the telling thing here.
You know what? Let's wrap this up. I'll find that when we go off air, and then we'll talk. We'll bring it up quickly on the next episode. So Spence, tell everybody where they can find you, what you are up to, and what you're doing.
So yeah, JTRB1, like he said. I mean, you can pretty much find me anywhere on that: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I mean, not Facebook, but anywhere that you would ever hear of me is JTRB1. The only thing I want to shout out is charity. I'm big into charity. Love giving back to the people who are undeserving and less deserving. Not undeserving, less deserving. And No Kid Hungry is Jonathan Taylor's 2021 My Cause My Cleats, or sorry, 2020 My Cause My Cleats. I've been just riding with them ever since. If you ever get the opportunity to, do any events or post any videos like highlighting a charity, a local shelter, anything like that, it takes no time out of you, and it can really help a lot of people out. So big fan of charity. Just think about your neighbors, think about your community, and help out when you can, especially when it comes at a little cost to you, but it's a big help for everybody else.
I love that, man. I was actually just talking to somebody the other day, and it's weird that there are a lot of people out there, unfortunately, that have this perception that if you don't donate to a cause that you say you're passionate about, that equates to not having like a real passion. And some people just don't have the monetary flexibility to do that. But just like
putting so many other ways.
Putting out a tweet, like Twitter is free. You can put out a tweet and say, hey, I feel real passionately, like you said, Spence, No Kid Hungry. And you can just say, hey, if you feel the same way and you never really thought about donating, here's the link. And you don't ask for anything. You just send them the link. People retweet that, people like that ends up on other people's feed. All of a sudden someone goes, oh man, I got an extra $5 I can give to No Kid Hungry. I got an extra $20 I can give to No Kid Hungry. And you would be amazed.
That's 50 meals right there.
Yeah. And I had a tweet that kind of blew up a little bit. My son is 8 and he asked me, he said, Dad, what can I do for people around me? What can I do for people that need help? And I said, you know what? My father-in-law is very big into Shriners Children's Hospital.
Okay, yeah.
They deal with children that have all kinds of disabilities and diseases, and their goal, and it is what they do. It's not just a goal; it's what they do. Any person that comes there, they leave no bill. It doesn't matter how long they stay. It doesn't matter how many surgeries are done, how much medicine is given. The parents leave with absolutely no bill. And the parents who have to fly there because they don't live close by, they're put up with housing that they don't have to pay for. They're fed, they're given meals that they don't have to pay for. So we did a walk. We did, obviously there were people that were running, did a 5K run, but my son and I, my entire family, we just walked. And I just said, hey, if you can donate, that would be great. I don't even care, $100 or 20 cents. It doesn't matter. Every dime, every nickel, every penny goes to helping children who are sick and that need that help. And so I love the fact that you brought up something that's close to your heart because just a tweet. I didn't say, oh, hey, if you donate to my charity, I'll donate to your charity. I just put the tweet out there. A bunch of people retweeted it. A bunch of people liked it. A bunch of people donated. And my son, this wasn't me. I just put a tweet out there. My son raised $700 for St. Jude. Not St. Jude's, for Shriners Children's Hospital. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, that's crazy. Just because he asked me a question, just because he was like, hey, I want to help. I want to do something. And I was like, yeah, we can definitely do stuff. And that's all it takes. So On that note, thank you to the chat. Chat was lit. We had great questions. We had great comments. I'm waiting for my 2 firsts and a second for Jimmy Garoppolo, Steve. So get on that. If you're in the chat, thank you. Hit the bell. Hit subscribe. So that you know when we're gonna be live. If you're doing the podcast thing, appreciate you too, man. Hour and 45 minutes we're gonna be at by the time this is all wrapped up. That's a lot of time. You could be doing anything else, and I appreciate that you spent the time to listen to us talk about football. Just
Fake
hit
football.
that fantasy football, right? Not even a little bit of real stuff. We talked about the news. Hit subscribe if you just like tripped and fell on us and we're like, oh, never heard of these guys. Let's see what it is. Hit subscribe. If you're already subscribed, please rate and review, man. Those are so important. It gets you in front of more people, and that's all we want to do, man. We want to talk to as many people as possible, have as much fun as possible. So on that note, Drew, we are out of here.
Late.